Welcome back to another video. In this video, I'm going to be sharing one useful technique that can help you to manage difficult questions that might come up in conversations. Now, for most of us, we don't really like those difficult questions that come up, and if we're not really prepared with a technique that we can use, you can find that you're a little bit on the back foot and you can kind of lose your power. You can even get a bit emotional and the whole atmosphere around the conversation can change. So if you can find a way, and you can use this technique as one way to help you manage difficult questions, you can help to stay in control. So you can help to stay in your power. You can help to maintain a sense of presence, and you can actually influence the conversation so that it stays on topics that you feel really comfortable with. Now, if that sounds of value, let's get into it. So this little technique is a technique that I learnt when I was doing media work. So I used to do quite a lot of media interviews with mainstream media, with journalists and chat shows and so on. Now, journalists actually really like to ask difficult questions, because if a journalist asks a difficult question and you stumble and bumble and you say something you didn't mean to say, then there's more likelihood that they're going to get some kind of controversial answer, or they're going to get something that makes for a better story than simply a kind of planned and controlled response. And so you actually don't want, in the case of media interviews, to be taken down a track that you just don't want to go, because that's good for the journalist. They get a more controversial story. It's good for the other person, but it's not so good for you. Now, being in control of the conversation, and in particular managing challenging and difficult questions as part of a conversation, can be particularly hard if you're someone that is accustomed to being to people pleasing. So if you're someone that generally, finds that you're saying yes when you mean no, or no when you mean yes, or you're putting other people's needs first and yours last, then this technique can be particularly valuable to really help you get on the front foot. And that way you'll be able to stay in your power, you'll be able to feel much more confident, and you'll also be able to manage the energy of the conversation. And those things are really valuable if you're looking to grow your influence and to really be able to, stand in your power and have that a sense of personal integrity and strength. And it also helps you to avoid kind of getting too emotional and going down that track as well. So let's get into it. Now, this technique is called bridging, and it is a technique that you will notice is being used a lot by people that do a lot of media work, in particular politicians, but don't let that put you off. So it's called bridging because it's about acknowledging the question and then creating a bridge back to the point that you want to make. So by building that bridge, you're able to really stay in control and help to steer the conversation in a way that you want it to go. So it's really, really useful technique to use. And it's a little bit like I did parasailing only once, but I do remember when the parasail or the parachute was on my back and I was connected to a rope and the boat was sort of, out there way ahead. And as the boat picked up speed and the rope started to tighten, I started to feel this sense of nervousness, which is a little bit like what can happen when you're faced with a difficult question. But then all of a sudden, the boat picked up enough speed for me to go up in the air, the parachute filled with air, and, I was lifted up. And so that bridging technique is a little bit like that feeling of elevation. It just gives you something to go to that can save you from those feelings of discomfort. So an example of how it's used would be, for example, say you're going home and you know that you're going to be having dinner with family and that there's one of your unfavorite aunts or uncles are going to attend, and they always ask you, when are you going to have children, for example. So you go to the dinner and of course, sure enough, the question comes up, hey, when are you going to have children? It's been a while, hasn't it? And you notice yourself starting to get a bit annoyed and angry. Instead of, responding in perhaps a reactive way, you can use the bridging technique, and it might go something like this. So you might say, hey, auntie, blah, blah, or uncle so-and-so, I can understand that you're really interested in knowing when I'll be having children because you've got such a great, large family, and having family around is really important, and I can see that it really fills you up. I haven't really given it too much thought lately, but what I have given a lot of thought about is just noticing how great your garden looks. You've put in some new flowers and some new veggies. Tell me a bit about that and what you're growing. So what you've done, as you will have experienced then, is you've acknowledged the question. So you've given them and paid them the respect about, hearing what they've said. But you haven't answered the question directly, and you haven't answered the question in a way that puts you into any kind of hot water or has you go down a track that you really don't want to go. You've bridged over to a conversation about their garden that you feel much more comfortable speaking about. And another example may be that you're going out with a group of friends, and when you go out with these particular friends, you find that the conversation often turns to politics. And you're not really that interested in politics. You find that some of your views are different, and whenever the conversation goes down that track, the night just doesn't turn out to be one that you particularly enjoy. So you might prepare yourself, and when the question comes up like, hey, did you hear about the new policy by the red, green or blue party? What do you think about it? And you really don't want to answer it. You might say something like, using the bridging technique, I heard about that policy. It's not really one that I've given a lot of deep thought to, so I'm not that informed to answer that today. What I have noticed, however, is that someone's building a new house next door to you. Is someone new moving in? Again, you've acknowledged the question, but you've changed the subject over to something that you feel much more comfortable about, and which might help to keep the night light and easy and breezy if that's the mood that you're in. So you're in control. Another example may be that perhaps you've brought someone home to meet your parents and you've forgot to let them know beforehand, and they got a little bit annoyed. So you can use the bridging technique to help manage the atmosphere and avoid any defensiveness and overly emotional reactions. So an example may be that you asked the question, why didn't you let me know you were bringing your friend home to meet me? I would have been a little bit more prepared. I really do like to know beforehand. And rather than get defensive and try and justify it, you could, using the bridging technique, say, yes, I do acknowledge that I didn't let you know. I'm really sorry about that. But what I would like to let you know today is that I'm planning a holiday to Thailand. I know you've been to Thailand. Can you tell me what places would you recommend I visit? And so you've acknowledged the question, you've apologized within that, and then you've immediately bridged over to a topic that lightens the atmosphere and keeps it on a topic that you feel really comfortable talking about. I trust you found that little technique of value, and if you'd like further support around speaking up with confidence, then check out my services on my website, which is sharonnatoli.com, and or connect with me on Instagram at Sharon Natoli Speaks. And certainly you can feel free to subscribe to this channel for regular video updates around finding your voice and speaking up. In the meantime, simply carry on speaking up, finding your voice, and being more of who you already are.